called the Exec Committee. Welcome to members of staff and media and anyone who might be watching this on the live stream. So first of all, we start our already apologies. None. Move on to the declaration of interest. Going on to confirmation of the previous minutes from the 2nd of March. So I'd like to move Councillor Timdale and Councillor McRory, second of those. Any discussion, comments? Okay, I'll put them. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Before we go on to the memorandum reports, we also have a late agenda item, which is the appointment of the independent member for the Performance Audit and Risk Committee. This is something that the council had delegated to the exec committee to do, and we've gone through that process and are ready to confirm someone in that role because that person hasn't had the opportunity to do their due diligence yet. It has to be done in public excluded. But ask the government's advisor just to run through the requirements for a late item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recommendation from officers is that the Executive Committee, pursuant to Section 46A(7) of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987 and Clause 9.12 of the Waitaki District Council Standing Orders, agrees to accept the late urgent business item as public excluded item 6.3 for consideration at this Executive Committee meeting for the reasons stated below. A, the item was not able to be included in the final agenda papers because the appointment recommendation had not been finalised at that time. And B, the item cannot be delayed until a subsequent meeting because the appointment needs to be confirmed to facilitate the signing of an engagement agreement with the successful applicant, who will then be able to attend the next meeting of the Performance Audit and Risk Committee, scheduled to be held on Tuesday, 27 April 2021, as an independent member of the committee with eligibility to participate as a member and to vote on matters before that meeting.
Thank you very much. Right, someone like to move that we accept that as a late item? Councillor Kingham, Councillor Wallstein. Those opposed say aye. Aye. Those against, that's carried. Okay, thank you very much for that. So now move on to 4.1, Economic Development Update, and welcome Mr. Jerry Quinn, Economic Development Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will take it that the report has been read. Maybe in summary, I could just point out the difficulty associated with forecasting economic events in the last year and a half, that virtually every forecast or scenario has not turned out to be as anticipated. Waitaki is still continuing to only experience mild effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. We can see that there is a lessening at the moment of people on job seeker support levels. That's a very encouraging sign. In general, our economy is very strong. There may be in the future limits on perhaps the production of dairy and cattle production in the district with the environmental standards. However, there are many national organisations working to actually make sure that we have the best results for both the environment and the economy. There has been a lot of work done recently on the future of tourism. New Zealand is no less attractive now than it was before. In fact, it may well be more attractive. We may in the future get reduced volumes due to increased prices, but I think it still will be a valuable part of Waitaki's economy going forward. We are expecting an announcement on the Trans-Tasman bubble from central government sometime this afternoon. We do have the opportunity at the moment to scale up some of our existing businesses, especially in the engineering and manufacturing sectors. Our population projections are still very modest, but as our attractiveness increases, if we can advertise ourselves well enough, I think then we have the opportunity to gain from the people that are looking to either relocate to New Zealand or move within New Zealand.
Okay. Anyone got any questions?
Councillor Wolseley.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Kircher. Yeah, thanks, Stuart, for your report. Just on your destination management strategy, I'm just wondering, is there any funding for that? I see it's been done through your team and also Tourism Waitaki.
Yes.
Is there any special funding for that, or was that just done from
No,
existing?
MBIE gave a grant to Tourism Waitaki, and it's been largely funded out of that. But what we are finding is that the visitor economy is wider than just tourism and destination marketing. So we're bringing just sort of like what is new product development, what is new business development from it, which we fund out of our economic development team staff, basically Melanie Jones and myself.
Okay, thank you, Jared. Just a follow-up question, just going down to your fourth bullet point, towards the bottom of page 13, where the government is saying that the Otago University Tourism Policy School, government and social local council should recover the costs of supporting tourism and mitigating negative effects by instituting taxes and user charges.
Yes, there was a wide range of people who participated in this school, from Minister Nash through to academics. People from Tourism Switzerland were zooming in, saying what we're going to do. A lot of the discussion, especially as it was hosted in Queenstown, was around things like international visitor levy, border taxes, the bed tax being very topical in Queenstown, and right from government level down, the sentiment was tourism has benefits and it has costs that don't fall in the same place, and that may be on the environment or it may be on infrastructure costs. And the general comments across virtually all participants was that as a country, we don't charge for what people come to see, and we can't offset the costs of maintaining those and presenting them and the damage done to them. So there was just general discussions around border taxes, departure taxes, international visitor levy, and should local institutions, say, charge for museums and galleries and things like that, which are traditionally free in New Zealand, but not to visitors overseas. There was quite a bit of support for a discretionary pricing for New Zealand residents and non-New Zealand residents.
Of course, that's already happening in things like the Great Walks and hut bookings, hut fees are both at two levels, New Zealanders and non-New Zealanders, so that's been done already.
I think there's a change in sentiment across that whole visitor industry that the less visible costs have to be paid for somehow.
Yeah.
And we have to have new ways of charging it. There's a lot of dispute, of course, between perspectives on whether you do that via a general tax or a specific charge. And I think that's some of the work of the Tourism Task Force to work that out.
Thank you, Jared.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Jared. Good report. Page 14. I just was wondering, first, I'm assuming you mean under other activities, the last line, extend the visa instead of the buyers.
The buyers, yes.
Yeah, that's okay though. And top performing 4 pages for the Neat Places campaign. We've got 2 restaurants in there, well, restaurant eateries. I'm just wondering, have you been in touch to see how they're, if it's made a difference to their actual business going through?
One of them was probably pretty well at capacity generally anyway. It's actually popular as well. I think the value of the Neat Places, and we have had some reporting increased inquiries and sales, was that generally it became, we can do things in Waitaki, and we were presenting 15 things in front of people, so they said, I'm going to go there. So I think while that report's the top 4 of the people focused on, the benefit was spread around a lot of places, including things like art studios and galleries.
Councillor Tavendale.
Just talking mainly the destination management strategy, but also around the spatial plan. Just want to understand what you're feeding in there, because I guess what my concern is, if we're pulling back to a strategic level, is these are very strategic documents, and I feel like we haven't had those discussions around the council table to be giving you strong direction. So I do kind of wonder what you touched on some of the things that are discussed here and things like us recovering the cost of supporting tourism and things like that there, which is quite a strategic, movement and shift. And it does sort of concern me that those discussions are happening before you've actually come and got a position from the council table.
So the report there on those national trends were exactly those. They are national trends being discussed. They haven't been suggested in the Waitaki Destination Management Strategy because it is at the stage of going out to people and asking what are the issues and where do you think the strategy should look at. So that would be a term at which it would come back to council obviously for input as well. So it hasn't been, none of those ideas have been promoted as a Waitaki answer. Sorry, your second part was on spatial planning. That really is around finding, providing perspectives from other councils, other cities, other towns, other countries about how do you shape your town, providing those inputs, perspectives on what are the things that attract people to a place or to a part in the town, promoting discussion really around should we have precincts that extend beyond the ones we have now. So effectively a provision of perspectives that the consultants on the spatial plan decide to really.
Let's go. Just through the chair, if I may, I guess, do you see a need to be touching base with elected members a bit more when you are discussing strategic? Like the only time we hear is on these reports back after the fact, and I don't feel like we're arming you with the strategic direction, but I also don't feel like it's being requested of us, which for me, I'm just highlighting it's a bit of a concern.
Yes, I suppose the spatial plan and things like that has a project plan of its own, run by another council department, which includes when it interacts with council. So I suppose I'm reporting here on contributing into something which I would expect to be reported by the channel. But happy to increase the.
I just feel a destination management strategy, it sounds like you're a relatively large part in that discussion. And I just feel like before you're entering those discussions, I would have thought having some kind of general direction given to you by the elected members would.
But there are council representatives on the governance group working party of the destination management strategy.
Just a step back though, I think you've got to realise there's a difference between pulling in two councillors or whatever it is to a discussion and actually having an opportunity as elected members before the fact to actually say this is the directions we support and these are the discussions that we back having. I just think sometimes we sort of seem to think if we pull two councils in, then we've got the council perspective when councils don't always actually have the same perspective, and I think that's where we actually need to have a chance to discuss before these things happen outside of us.
Okay, I noticed that.
Mr. Bauer wants to make a comment, but it probably isn't so unlike, say, our community development advisor feeding into the housing task force. You know, we haven't been asked for a view on that, so we are expecting staff to give their professional views from their professional perspectives as far as what the different elements are that they represent in their jobs. But having said that, yes, we haven't had that discussion ourselves on some of those things. Mr. Bauer, you would add to that?
Yeah, just highlight the fact that the destination management work is actually a Tourism Waitaki activity, and the funding is actually MB funding provided to Tourism Waitaki. So the approach being taken in relation to consultation involves the establishment of a governance group, of which the mayor is the chair of that governance group. And then there is a project group which provides input as well. But it's at the commencement, really commencement stages of that process. So no doubt there'll be a great deal of discussion to be had over the next little while.
If I can respond quickly, I think some of the stuff, for instance, Housing Task Force, we do have some general strategic direction that we've given on what our role is there and some understanding of when things come back to us. When a strategy is sitting from outside of council and we're only feeding into it, then the only time we actually have any control over the information that is contained in that strategy is actually in that feeding in time. So that's when us having the discussions at the right time to get what our council's strategic direction is on this topic actually needs to happen, because we're not going to have that decision-making portion of that further down the track. So I guess I'm just sort of talking about how we talk about these things and what the best time is to do that. And if we're feeding into an external group, I would have thought a discussion and a bit of an understanding of where we support, where we don't, and what we're actually feeding in before those things happen are actually quite helpful.
I can certainly take it back to the governance group because they have yet to sign the official project plan steps. So I take that back and say it's been a request for an earlier council involvement.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, there is a lot of similarities with the housing task force, and that we don't have established positions on most of what the topic is about. And it has been frustrating as someone that's not on that group to not know what's been going on until we had a workshop recently. So there are a lot of similarities. I understand where you're coming from. But, you know, I think the main thing is that our representatives on respective groups are working in best interests and with the good, better information able to get through those groups. So I think the main thing is that we have a good understanding that at the right points this will come back to us and we'll have an opportunity to discuss it in more detail.
So it will?
Add some input.
It
Sorry.
will.
Well, again, it's has to be decided. But certainly, my expectation is what it would need to be, because this is a process that Tourism Waitaki is overseeing. But equally, it's including myself and councillors, part of the two groups, helping to run the process. But I do have a question on the destination management plan. You make a comment about Tourism Minister Stuart Nash saying that they're not going to be giving ongoing subsidies and so on to the sector, but they are looking at how they fund destination management plans. As we're very aware, McKinsey got something like $800,000 to do their destination management plan. Waitaki got, I think, about a tenth of that, less than a tenth. And which, is we're trying to make do as best as possible, but it seems very much like we're very poor cousin in this circumstance when actually visitor numbers are appreciable, and pretty much all of the visitors that have gone through McKinsey go through Waitaki at some stage. Is there an opportunity to actually go back to the MB well and ask them for some more funding so that we can do our job as best to our abilities?
That was raised at the last governance group meeting, and with the final project plan, including all the steps, it was expressed that they wish that the project team goes back to MBIE to see what that be increased.
Good. We want to do that process really well and be as inclusive as McKinsey is able to be. But it does cost money, and it would be really helpful if we can get more funding for that. Okay. Anything else in the report or any other DD matters? Councillor McRoby.
Yeah, Chair. Jared, could you tell us if there is a regional breakdown either in the top performing 4 pages or the 3-month Oamaru and Waitaki numbers?
We haven't got that. It was because there's a lot of movement between the two, just given as a combined project, presented as one project, but we could go back and try and break down. I have to check though whether or not we can actually tell whether a hit is from an Oamaru or Waitaki, but I can certainly try and do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Right. Just before we move into public excluded, just give publicly just an update. We've officially in public excluded will be appointing the independent member for the PAR committee. This group has decided on who is discussions are happening with that person, and they are not completed yet. So we're going to be formally ratifying the decision, still subject to due diligence being carried out by that person. What I do want to make note in public though is that the intention of having an independent member is fulfilling requirements pointed out by both audit and through Council Park, that we have someone independent on the Performance Audit Risk Committee to help us go through those processes. I think we've found someone who's going to do that very well. Very pleased with the applicants we had. So we'll see how that goes overall, but look forward to introducing that person on the 27th of March when we have our first meeting. April, sorry. Councillor Wallstein, good thing you have calendars and numbers. So we'll look forward to that happening at that time. Anyway, in the meantime, we need to move into public excluding now. So do we have
One question, someone take a check.
Yes.
On the website, the screenshot of your website on the report there, Jared, the photos are the right way around, but the text is all back to front. So is that a test for local ratepayers to have to learn to read backwards?
No, that's us. That's us looking out.
Oh, okay, that's what it is.
Yes, I think that is actually, sometimes that happens in pasting things into a council type document. We get sometimes get up with them being reversed.
Yeah. My question was take a check.
It's okay with the mirror.
Yeah, okay. The photos back to front.
Right, yeah. Now move into public exclusion. Sorry, better receive the report first. So thank you, Councillor Roby, Councillor Williams. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And we go into public excluded. Councillor Tavendale, Councillor Wallstein. Thank you. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, it's carried. Now pause for a minute while we get the live stream switched off and move over to public exclusion.